When making a pinch pot, you want to start by smoothing or rolling or smacking your clay into a ball. If you end up with little wrinkles, you want to just smooth those over with your thumb. You shouldn't have to add water at this stage because the clay just came out of the bag where it is stored. So just do some smoothing, roll it around in your hands or on your paper. It doesn't have to be perfectly round or perfectly smooth. You just want it to be pretty compressed together and pretty smooth on the outside. The big wrinkles would cause some frustrating moments while you're making your pinch pot. So you've got a ball. You take your thumb and you stick it into the ball right up to your first thumb joint. And then you use your hand like a duck. So your thumb goes back into the thumbprint and your fingers help to manipulate the clay from the sides and bottom to pull up and create walls. So you make a pinching motion as you rotate the clay in your hand. Make sure you don't pinch too much because you don't want it to be too thin. You also don't want it to be too thick. So you're looking for like a Goldilocks thickness here of your walls as you're rotating it. I am getting some cracks and crevices here. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just focusing on the form for right now. I'm using my fingers to pull the clay from the bottom as well up to the sides. If I have big cracks and crevices, I'm going to smooth those with my thumb so they don't become a structural issue. I don't want my sculpture to fall apart. And I'm going to push down with my thumbs to create a base that sits on my table. If I were going to turn my pinch pot into a fish, I wouldn't necessarily want to do that, but perhaps if I already know that this is going to be the bottom. When you have these cracks and crevices, you take a little bit of water on your fingertips and you smooth them out. So applying a little bit of pressure, smoothing out those crevices. Now is a good time to smooth out any kind of lumps you might have or unevenness. And at this stage, because you're going to be picking up the clay and moving it around in your hands and sculpting more, I wouldn't get too invested in making it perfect, right? We're looking for good solid structure, making sure the clay doesn't have a lot of cracks in it. But in terms of these lumps and bumps at this stage in the clay process, don't worry about those too much because you're going to be picking up this clay and handling it some more, and it's just going to get lumpy again as you add more elements. So I want to pick it up and smooth it. I can even put it rim side down on my work paper and smooth it out. You don't want to add too much water because it will get slimy and it will collapse in on itself or be impossible to sculpt. So just make sure you're keeping in mind that you don't want to have too much water, but you want to make sure that your clay stays moist. A lot of Goldilocks opportunities here. Getting it just right. And honestly, just right is something that you would see with your own eyes, right? So it's, pretty good. Structurally sound. So from this stage, I could keep pinching up and making my walls a little bit narrower. As long as I'm keeping in mind, I want to make sure the structure is good and not too thin. Most of the time, beginners with pinch pots pinch too much and they go right through the walls and make them thin. So it does take practice to be able to get the walls even and to have a good structure to them, but you can do this. It just takes time. So at this stage, I could work on refining the lumps and bumps some more and start adding my figurative elements. So remember, a figurative element is usually something that is inspired by a living animal or human. So you could put eyes, ears, a tail, etc. on this, or we are including plants and funguses and bacteria and so forth so that you can really flex your creative muscles for how to do that. Okay, so that's a pinch pot, pretty good structure, and you could start adding on to it. So from here, I'm going to make additional separate tutorial videos for how to do coil building and how to add your figurative elements.